as you had mentioned a little bit earlier, you're a toxicologist. You're by training. You worked at Dow, although it seemed like from earlier conversations you got sidetracked into sort of a public relations function during a pretty interesting time, in that it was the Vietnam War. Dow was the manufacturer of Agent Orange, not the most popular chemical on the face of the earth in the United States during that era. That must have been a baptism of fire type of a situation.
Yeah, you know, it was interesting, and may give you a little bit of the backstory, because I've done a lot of thinking about, you know, my history, especially recently. And I did a talk a few years ago over at Dalton State College when they were putting together an MBA program over there, and somebody asked me the question about, you know, how did a kid with a double major in math and chemistry get to be the president of a national trade association? And I said, you know, as I look back on the various dozen or so jobs, assignments I've had over the years, every one of those was a very logical progression from one job to the next. But if somebody said, okay, I want you to plot the course that you would follow going from a, you know, very highly technical chemistry and math background to the job you're in today, it's impossible. I could never have done it. So, but
it made sense the way it played out.
At the time, it did. The other thing that I was struck by as I thought back is every time that I was asked to take a new assignment, I did it kicking and screaming. When I first started at Dow, I was in an analytical lab and got to be very, very good at what I did. I did spectral analysis, which is more technical than we want to get into, but was very, very good at it. And then I was in that job for about 5 years, and the vice president of research says, Werner, we want you to move to Midland, Michigan. At that time, I was in Indianapolis at their life sciences division. And he said, we need you to move to Midland. And I said, well, I don't want to move to Midland. I really like what I'm doing here. I'm good at what I do here. He says, you don't understand. We need you to go to Midland. So, you know, I was not real excited about moving, but got in there, and they were starting up a new metabolism lab. And part of that was developing analytical methods to measure blood levels in animals or humans even, being able to identify the metabolites of the chemical was changed to by the human body. So, I mean, that was a real logical step. And when I got into it, I thought, you know, yeah, this makes a lot of good sense. And then Perry Gehring, who was the director of the Tox Lab after about 5 years, and it's interesting, all these things happen in 5-year increments as I think back. He came to me one day and he says, you know, I need for you to learn about toxicology. And I said, Perry, why would I want to learn about toxicology? And he says, because you need to understand the toxicology so that you can then do models. And I said, models? What are models? You know, so, you know,
Yeah.
But it's been interesting. Every one of my jobs, you know, as I said, built on the other one, and it's I think made me a better, more well-rounded individual.
Opening doors you didn't know existed.
Well, exactly. You know, what's behind door one? You know, I don't know, but you know, you need to take it.
So do you miss that science end, day in, day out, analytical science that you were involved in? Have you missed that over the last several years?
Well, you know, 2 comments I'll make. I love science. Absolutely love science. In fact, when I have time to do fun reading, my reading is astrophysics and archaeology.
Astrophysics and archaeology.
Yeah, and so, you know, I guess on the inside, I still love science. I mean, that's why I got into it to begin with. The other comment I'll make is that it's pretty interesting to me how much science there is in the issues that the CRI works on. I mean, we just talked about green chemistries.
Yeah.
And certainly having an understanding of, the difference between, toxicity, exposure, and risk or hazard, allows me to look at that and say, okay, here's the strategy that would probably be the most appropriate.
And that knowledge and the way your mind works has certainly helped you in this position at
Well,
SCRI,
I think so.
imagine.
I think, if you think about the word analytical, you're analytical in what you do. So I think, having the ability to analyze, whether that be chemicals or issues or whatever,
One and the same, I guess.
It really is. It's just that the substrate is different.
Yeah. Now, getting from that, an analytical, and even I know you had a PR function when you were with Dow. And in fact, I think you even had some exposure to the carpet industry, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get from that into the trade association arena?
Yeah, it's very interesting. You mentioned that I had gotten in, well, I had, along this series of jobs, I had a job called Issues Management at Dow. And it's very similar to the job that I have here at CRI. I would have a number of issues that would come out of the product departments at Dow, and we'd try to develop strategies to deal with those issues in the marketplace. And when you're developing strategies, you look at, what are the technical issues around that issue, what are the regulatory issues around that issue, and what are the legal issues around that issue. All exactly the same sorts of things we do here today. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I got into that kind of an effort on what was called specialty products, which was the non-commodities part of the Dow business. And I was in that job, and in 2000, in 1990, my boss said the carpet industry is having an issue. And this was the time at which the Killer Carpet, headline hit the New York Times above the fold. And so he said, go down to Dalton and work with the carpet and rug industry and put together an issues management strategy to deal with this killer carpet issue. And so that was in 1990, and I remember actually making a presentation to the CRI board on the strategy that we'd put together to deal with this issue. Then fast forward to well, we could fast forward all the way to 2000, so this doesn't get too lengthy. But I got a call from a friend here in Dalton and said, Ron Van Gelderen is retiring, and they're doing a search. Would you be interested in throwing your hat in the ring? And long story short, I did, and apparently enough people were still around from when I'd helped the industry in 1990 to when they were doing this job search, and and ultimately that's how I ended up here in Dalton.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I didn't know that. What was your image of the industry when you first arrived and when you came down to do that presentation before the board, and later when you got involved in it? What was your image in, was it 2000 or 19?
1990.
What was your image at that point of it?
Well, my image was fairly limited because my exposure at that time was really related to this one particular issue that revolved around volatile organic compounds and what Rosalind Anderson had done. But it was pretty obvious to me that this was the very first time that this industry was faced with an environmental issue. So it was dramatically different than the company I was working for because, as you said, for years and years and years, Dow has been faced with environmental issues, Agent Orange just being one of many, many, many. So, you know, there was a lot of expertise in our company, not just me, that was working on issues, environmental health and safety issues. So, you know, there was not a lot of expertise in that area when I first was exposed to them in 1990. And then my image changed again in 2000 when I came, because that was the point at which the whole issue of sustainability was beginning to first really get traction in this industry, although Interface and Ray Anderson, you know, were talking about it, you know, 10 or 15 years before that, but the industry as a whole really had not really begun to focus on that at any, you know, significant level. But what I was taken by, and I still talk about this today and have in a number of presentations I've done on this issue, this industry has done an incredible job on sustainability. And it was my pleasure really to work here on defining that journey that the industry had started well before 1990. And we were able to go back and characterize all the things that the industry had done on a truly voluntary basis to reduce its environmental footprint. And you know, examples like, you know, using half as much water per square yard, half as much energy per square yard, reductions in hazardous air pollutants from the plants, all done on a voluntary basis. And so it was really, I mean, it was very gratifying for me to be able to lead the effort to go back and really position the industry as very environmentally responsible. And in fact, I've said, you know, when I look at the vast majority of other industries I've been exposed to, they have, the carpet industry has an incredible track record in terms of its journey on sustainability. So,
and has been a leader in that. And that's really, I guess, the whole situation that brought you into the industry in the 1990s, the Rosalind Anderson mouse test, I guess, that, you know, started all this, killer carpet. The reaction to that was really what caused this to happen and put the carpet industry in a position to be a leader.
Well, it is, but being a leader also has its pitfalls. And, you know, one of the things, and one of the pitfalls, frankly, is when you are a leader, people look to you to continue to lead. And so a perfect example of that is EPR legislation. You know, here we have a product that is non-toxic, non-hazardous, and yet, you know, there is this push to create extended producer responsibility on carpet. And many would say it's because we are visible and we are a leader that we, you know, get targeted. And, you know, I'll say this today, I think there's a lot better targets for people in the environmental community, legislative and regulatory community than the carpet industry. But yet, you know, we have the opportunity to once again lead in this area.
I see.
Rolling of the eyes.